Hi, I'm Neil with Diamond Mowers, and today I'd like to walk through the steps of rebuilding an actuator swivel. Over time you may encounter a leak between the housing and the end caps, either in the top or the bottom, or you may get oil leakage out of the grease purge ports right here. Either way, you'll need to install a new seal kit, and here are the steps on how to do it. So we're going to start by putting the swivel on a workbench. We made this workbench so it can drain out and drain the oil away, but we will remove these two plugs. And any residual oil there is going to drain out and drain away. And then the next step is to remove these 4 plugs from the lock pin. This is the lock pin right here. In one of these holes, there's a dowel pin. So my dowel pin is in this hole right down here. I'm going to take the tiny bolt that comes with the kit, and that's going to thread right into that dowel pin. Thread that in there and pull that dowel out. So that we're going to set aside. We're going to clean it up and then reuse it when we put everything back together again. So next we're going to take the two other bolts here, the bigger bolts, and those we're going to thread into our holes, one on either side, and then using a pry bar, we're going to unscrew that lock nut. So we're going to unscrew this to the point where it's just got a couple threads still on there. Yeah, right about there. So we've got about that much exposed at this point. So the next step then is to remove our grease purge points. They're over on the side here. It's the ones that look a little bit like a grease fitting, but aren't. Let me pull this one out and show it to you. So there, just looks like that. It's actually got a piece right there in the middle that spring-loaded. When you pump it full of grease, it'll purge out the extra grease right out that little port. So we're going to use an air gun here, and in the hole that we just removed the grease purge port from, we're going to blow air into there, and that will actually blow this out a ways. So after it comes out about this far, you can see just a little bit of the seal right there. Then you can completely remove your lock nut in the center. And then using 2 of the bolts that mounted it into the frame, we're going to thread these in here, opposite each other, and then use those as handles to remove our end cap. So like I said before, using the dowels, the bolts here as handles, you can pull that out and then set that aside. So then we turn the housing around, thread in bolts on this size. Of course, different size bolts, top and bottom. And these are just the same bolts that attach it to the frame. Thread those in there. I'm going to take my pry bar and thread that out. So these things are very heavy, just keep that in mind. So the last part we have to take out is our piston sleeve that's in the middle. So this is where you're going to want to use we've got this plastic bar, or you could use a chunk of wood or something that isn't going to mar up that surface, because it might take a little bit of effort to knock that out. We're going to get that to move. So this one was fighting me a little bit, so I turned it up on its end so I could pound straight down, and then got that piston sleeve to move. I'm going to flip it on its back again and remove that piston sleeve. All right, so when it's almost out here, then you can just go ahead and pull that on out. Be careful not to damage it or mar it up if you can. And we'll pull that out next. So at this time, what we really want to do is inspect right in here for any grooves or ridges, and that way we can tell if this thing is even rebuildable. If it has really deep grooves or big ridges, it's probably not rebuildable, but definitely call Diamond Service and Warranty and talk to them about it. They'll probably have you take some measurements and figure out if that is something you want to rebuild. On here as well, it's right around this area. Seals in there, but on the metal parts, make sure you don't have any grooves or damage, cuts, nicks, anything like that. So that's what you're looking for. Both ends of the housing. So once you have the piston sleeve out and you've inspected everything for wear, this one looks pretty good. First thing we're going to want to remove is our wear guide. It's also called a bearing, but for the purposes today, we're going to call it a wear guide. And there's our split right there. So we'll just take that off and slide that out. We're going to reuse this. So make sure there aren't any gouges or damage on any of that, and we'll set it aside. And then next, we will remove our seals. These are kind of a bear to get off, so don't be afraid to the original ones here. Just go ahead and cut those off once you can get behind them. Just cut them off with a pair of side cutters or something, because those will not be reused. It is a good idea to pay attention to what each seal looks like, because we've got a bunch of different style seals on all of our different parts. So I got the outside ones off. This also has interior, both wear guides and O-rings, so dig those guys out of there. After the piston sleeve, then we're going to grab the lock nut, and it's got an O-ring on the outside here and one on the inside. Pull those out and set that aside. And the next thing we grab is our end cap. So same as before, we've got our wear guides. If I can find the split in it, right there. Pop that out. Loop that over real quick. Looks pretty good. Now see how this one is overlapping like that? That's what you're looking for. This, if it doesn't overlap, it's not springy enough and isn't going to sit in its groove quite like it should. So that's what you're looking for, is a little bit of overlap on your wear guides. And we'll just peel out the rest of these seals. Okay, so that one comes off. That's our last seal. And then we've got our thrust washer. So that's right up against this portion right here. And just like everything else, we're going to take that off. And this is kind of like the bearing that it rides on. So that looks pretty good. This bearing actually has a little bit of a ridge right here that it's supposed to have. So that kind of fits into a grease groove down in your housing. And so a little bit of groove there is okay on that side, but you don't want any real big nicks out of the rest of it. Then lastly, we've got our shaft. Same thing, we've got our wear guides right here. So this one has two wear guides, a narrow one and then a wide one right on top of each other. So we will kind of make note of that. Remember that the narrow one goes on the shaft side and the wide one goes on the end cap side. But same as before, we'll peel all that stuff off, get our seals off, and then we'll start cleaning everything up. All right, so as I was cleaning everything up here, I realized that I totally forgot about this interior seal right here. So make sure you don't forget that guy. One seal on the interior of the cap. All right, so I got everything cleaned off, and as I was cleaning everything, I noticed I had a couple little very light scratches in or nicks or whatever you want to call it in a couple of these pieces, and I'm just going to take a piece of emery cloth like this and just kind of level that out a little bit. You know, if it's a deep scratch, then you've got bigger problems. You know, go ahead and call Diamond and Service and Warranty Department at Diamond Mowers and get some assistance on that. But if it's just a little bit of a nick, and right there we got one, go ahead and just some real fine grain emery cloth and take that out. I'll move on to the next piece. This is probably one of the worst. The other thing I'm looking at when excuse me, when I'm doing this is these timing marks. So for the most part, it's just a little divot like you'd put with a knock with a punch. So keep an eye open for those timing marks. You'll see some of them actually on splines or within splines. You know, just kind of pay attention to those because we'll be using those here in just a little bit when we go to put it together. So once everything is all cleaned and inspected, and you've taken care of any little nicks with your emery cloth, you want to take your seal kit, and what we're going to do is actually just put a hole right in the middle of that bag and take some oil. Seems like a lot, but we're going to use all of that. We'll just dump that right in there. Then we will roll it around here and get all those seals good and wet. And we can open up the bag a little bit more, and then we can start reinstalling seals. So now, like I said before, there are a lot of different types of seals and several different sizes. They should all pretty much make sense which one goes where as we're going through, but you know, just kind of pay attention to that. After you've got some oil in your bag, we're going to take some grease, and basically we're just going to grease up these thrust washers real good on both sides. We'll set those aside for the right time, and then we can start reinstalling everything. So we're going to start with the piston sleeve here, and as you remember, we took out two O-rings from the inside. You know, as you go through your kit, there's only the one size that's going to fit on the inside of that. One of these seals has an O-ring in its groove, and one of them does not. So you'll use one of each here. We're going to start with the one that's furthest on the bottom there. That's the cup seal without the O-ring. That has the groove facing down. So we're going to turn that down away from me, push that in there, find its groove, pop that into place. And be careful with these O-rings that you don't roll them or pinch them, and make sure that it fits fully into its groove. All right, same thing with our other O-ring. Now with the one with the O-ring, our seal with the O-ring, that groove is going to face up. So the O-ring side is going to face up. And we'll just go ahead and push that into place as well. So I'm just kind of working that into its groove. Being careful not to damage it. We're fully seated. I'm going to take my wear ring right here. Use that extra oil that's in the bag. Get that nice and lubed up. And and pop that in where it needs to go. All right, inside is done. Now we're going to work on the outside. Now we're going to look through our seals here, and again we're looking for cup seals. Those are the ones that look like little C's. One without an O-ring and one with an O-ring in the groove. And same as before, we're going to have one that fits in that bottom groove. We're going to kind of have to work this around to make it fit. Again, make sure that you're not damaging the seal. I'm going to turn this over. I think this might be easier to work on from this direction. So again, the C, the open part of the cup, facing down. Right in where she needs to go. Flip that back over. And this one is going to be facing up. So after you get both of your seals in there and the right direction, make sure they don't roll on you, because this one tried to. So I had to work it all the way around and get her in there the right way. Oil up your wear ring right there. Just pop it right into place. All right, so we're going to do the end cap next. We're going to start with the exclusion seal. That's going to be the biggest one, with the groove facing the mounting surface. So we got a groove here. It's got an O-ring in it. We're going to face that toward the threaded side. So we'll work that guy in there. Again, another reason why it's good to have nice oily seals, so everything slides on there good. So after we get the exclusion seal put on, then we're going to put our greased thrust washer on there. Now, if you recall, one side might have had a little bit of a groove on it. I just want to make sure that that side goes again toward the housing. So it's the same way. We'll slide that right over the top. So the Z seal is this one right here. So it's actually a two-piece seal that looks kind of like that. So we'll come apart. It's not an O-ring that goes in there, it's an actual other seal. So we'll put that one in next with the groove facing me. So I got my seals on. Of course, the wear ring will go on next. Snap right into place. You know, run your fingers along here. Make sure that it's not sticking out past the metal. So next thing I'm going to grab is my lock nut and two just O-rings. If you remember, one goes on the inside, one on the outside. Nice and easy. We've got our shaft. So I'll go ahead and put those. Obviously nothing on the inside, it's just the ones on the outside. Okay, that's our Z-ring right here. Largest one right there is our exclusion seal. The groove portion, that's going to face you. Next you're working your Z-ring into place. Z-seal. These are tight. Just be careful you don't damage anything while you're putting that on. I was looking at my seal kit here, and I've got two O-rings left. Well, remember the one I forgot to take out of the end cap? That one needs to go back in. That interior one with the O-ring needs to face you. So that's facing out toward me. I'm going to push that into place. And then I'm going to have one more left. And you're always going to have this extra O-ring. It's not used. Just set that aside. Then after you get your seals on, you can take your wear rings. The wide one goes on first. And then the thin one will go on next. And you don't want to line up the gaps, you know, offset those. Just like that. So it's time to put it back together again. If you turn the housing up, so you are looking at kind of the short end, shortest distance between the end and the splines, you'll find a timing mark. It's kind of hard to see, but it's one little mark right there on this one. So I'm looking for that timing mark, but then I'm also going to run this white paint pen all the way down that spline, so I can see it from the other side, because we're going to be inserting the piston sleeve from the other side. So I'll flip this over and reach back down in here where that was, and a little more white paint just so I can see what's going on there. So the same thing with the bottom side of the piston sleeve. I've got a mark right there, and I'm going to follow it over to this spline, and then in between these splines all the way down. This is going to be the hardest part of everything, because what you're trying to do is line up your timing mark on this in the valley of the spline with the spline that you marked down there in the housing. So we're going to line it up to where we think that's going to be, right about here, and drop that in, give it a little shove, tap that in. Now we're not trying to engage the splines quite yet. We just want to get it right up next to it. Okay, once you do that, you can lay it flat again and look on the end and see if you're lined up. All right, so this is the underside, and you can see that the white paint marks on the splines lined up just perfectly for TV. So this will probably never happen the first time that you drop that in there, but if it doesn't line up quite exactly right, go ahead and just tap it out all the way again, reposition where you think it's going to go, drop it back in, and then see if your splines will line up. But that's what you're looking for, is right there with those splines lined up. After you're sure that that's where it needs to go, turn it back up on its end again, and we will drive that piston sleeve all the way until it bottoms out on the other end. There she goes. All right, she's snug. Lay this thing down again so we can see there's our mark from before. We're going to pull our shaft over and find our timing marks in these splines. Now, what you're looking for is either a colored mark or some little divots like before, right in the valley of that spline. Right there. So just barely see it in this light, so I'm going to take my paint marker so I can see those. Make it a little bit easier to reinstall that way. And then same as before, we're going to carefully push that in place, making sure not to damage any of those seals. So we're going to line it up with the timing marks just like that and spin it right in. All right, at a certain point, we're going to need to take our mounting bolts again and then just spin it in with our pry bar. So you're going to spin it in until there's just a little bit of that exclusion seal still visible. Then we can go ahead and spin it around and do the other side. So on the inside of our end cap here, I found a timing mark right there on the end of one of those splines. And then I found this timing mark. There's one on either side of the valley that we need that other spline to live in. So once you have the splines exactly where they need to go, then you can tap that home. So once seated on the shaft here, you want to liberally coat the interior edges of the opening here and the threads with anti-seize, and also on our lock nut all the way around the edge and then on the interior threads as well. And we'll drop that on. This is very tight clearance as well, so just be aware of that. Work that on there and then use your bar to thread it on. We're going to tighten this down as far as we can get it, because remember, we're also pulling in the opposite side as well. When it's tight, your shaft will be just peeking out from the end of the lock nut. So once you get that cap tight, that lock nut, sight down your holes and look for the hole that your dowel pin is going to sit in. Where I'm at right now, I need to go just a little bit further in order to make that thing sit into the hole where it needs to go. So I'm going to tighten this up just a little bit more. Got out a clamp, clamped it to the table just so I can get a little more leverage on it. So I tightened her up just a little bit more, and that dowel pin goes all the way in. Then we'll remove our bolts here and replace our caps. So reinstall the grease purge plugs here and grease until we have grease coming out the purge port there, just like that. So I installed the fittings back into the housing and some hoses that I attached to a tractor. So what we're going to do now is just run through our test procedure, which is running the actuator both directions until it reaches the end of the stroke, and then holding it there, deadheading it for just a couple seconds, and then running that back and forth about 15 times or so. And what we're looking for here is any oil escaping from the seals on either side. Okay, so we stopped it at the end of the stroke. This hose is solid now, so that's the pressure side. I'm going to take off the non-pressure side and also disconnect that from the tractor. And then we're going to deadhead it that same direction and check for any internal leakage. All right, so what we've done, we've run that back and forth a few times. Now we're going to remove one side, deadhead it, and see if we've got any oil leaking through, leaking past. So we get a little bit, that's just residual, that's no big deal. And we'll deadhead it the other direction. Assuming everything tested out okay, the actuator is done and it can be reinstalled in the tractor. So if you do have any questions at all during the rebuild process, please call our service and warranty department or visit us at diamondmowers.com. Diamond Mowers, where you can demand brilliance.